Many libraries in North Carolina were started up by women's groups, book clubs, all across the state, and that was definitely true in Greenville. There was a women's book club called the End of the Century Book Club, and they were sharing their collection of books amongst each other. And in 1897, they decided that the wider community needed access to a collection of books. They needed a library. And so they decided to take their shared collection of books from the book club and find a way to make those so that people in the community could borrow them. And so they just needed a place to operate a little free lending library out of. And that's when the saga began. Because they did that, and because other people pitched in and shared the dream, we have a fantastic library now, almost 100 years later, and it's got a wonderful story. End of the Century Book Club, in 1903, they really took action to start the Greenville Public Library. There was a new Masonic temple that had been built beside the courthouse, okay? And they got permission from the Masons to use a couple of rooms in the Masonic temple to operate a little lending library out of, and that's where they put their collection of books. But in 1910, the Masonic temple burned, okay? And the book collection that wasn't checked out and circulating at the time burned with the Masonic temple. Was that the end of it? Obviously not. They kept having to move someplace else. So 1916, 1917, they were in the National Bank building at 5 Points that was there at the time. And then they moved into the graded school in 1920. Now another group stepped up to help out. It was the Greenville Women's Club. And they agreed to take over operation of this free lending library from the End of the Century Book Club. In 1928, the Women's Club asked the town alderman, things were growing, they asked the town alderman to take over operation of the library and support it, and the town alderman agreed to do that. There was a fire in 1929 at the graded school, and it burned. What happened then, local lady Elizabeth Pugh Carr and her husband, Dr. Robert Carr, who lived a couple of blocks from the library, they had an idea, and that was their cousin Harper Sheppard, that's Harper Donaldson Sheppard, who's behind me. He had grown up on the farm in Pitt County and went off to make his fortune. So he traveled around the world. He ended up in Hanover, Pennsylvania making shoes with the Hanover Shoe Company. He'd made a fortune. They wrote him a letter and asked if he would provide some funds to build a dedicated library building. It was getting really tiresome moving from building to building and place to place. So they wrote a letter, didn't hear anything back, thought they had made this, the faux pas of asking a wealthy relative for money, and now he'll never speak to us again. But they had some business in New England. They traveled north and stopped off in Pennsylvania to pay their respects to Harper. He welcomed them warmly, and Elizabeth said, I'm so sorry I asked you for money, maybe I shouldn't have done that. And he said, didn't you get my response? I'd love to do it. She never got his returned letter. Somehow the mail failed, but he had agreed to do it. And he gave them $50,000 in 1929. Bear in mind, this is right before the stock market crash and the start of the Great Depression, but they had all the details all sewn up ahead of that. He agreed to do it. And he ended up giving them an extra $10,000 to make it really great. And he had some specific things he wanted, like these beautiful cement columns that never have to be painted, things like that. He wanted something that would really be a great memorial to his father. That's the other piece. His father was William Henry Haywood Sheppard. Henry Sheppard was the clerk of the Superior Court in Pitt County, and he was well-liked and popular. And so Harper was happy to make a memorial library, for his father so that his memory would endure. So that's Harper Sheppard behind me. Henry Sheppard is, that's where the Sheppard name comes from.